What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Patrick here. Moving on to the next question. We have to compute the following over here. So notice that there are three questions. So starting with number one, we're asked, what's 325% of 120? Now, actually, before we get into these questions, I'm going to bring up a more simple question just so you could see how the process is broken down. So let's say we're asked, what is 80% of 100? And we know 80% of 100, the answer to that is obviously 80. But how do we get there? Well, what we did was we took the 100 and then we multiplied it by the decimal of this percentage. So we took the percentage, the way you take a percentage and convert it to a decimal, you take the percentage and divide it by 100. And so we would take that 100, 80 divided by 100 is 0.8. And then when you multiply these, you end up with the 80. So that's what the process is. So if we take this process and apply here, what's 325% of 120? Well, we would take the 120, multiply it by 325 over 100. We got to take this percentage, convert it to a decimal. So this would end up being 120 times 3.25, which would give us 390. So that's the answer to number one. And then number two is asking, what's 33 1/3% of 63? So this one's a little bit tricky. You got to be careful. 33 1/3. This 1/3 here, that's the decimal. So this we can rewrite as 33.333 repeating percent. Okay, and this percentage is the same as that fraction right there, right? 1/3 is 33.3333%. So this fraction and this fraction are not the same. This fraction here, this 1/3, is within this percentage notation, let's say. Let's use that word. So 33 1/3% is this. So this 1/3 here represents this over here. But this whole percentage can be represented with this fraction, or it could be represented with this decimal, 0.333 repeating. Right? So all of these are the same thing. And then just this here, another way to write it is here. So don't get confused with this over here. This fraction is not the same as this fraction. This fraction is within that percentage notation. Right? So whichever way you do it, what you can do is you could take this, divide it by 100, make sure that you write the threes as many decimal places as you can in your calculator. Or another easy way to do it is you could just take this 63 and multiply it by 1/3, right, by the fraction. So you either multiply by the fraction or this decimal, right? And this decimal, the way we get that is we take this percentage and divide it by 100. I'm just going to multiply it by the fraction, so 63 times 1/3, that would give us what, 21? So that ends up being the answer to number two. And then finally, number three, 148% of what is 481? So 3 is like number one, but backwards. So what we're doing is we're figuring out what's that initial number that we're multiplying by 148%, so that percentage, converting it to a decimal. What's that number when we multiply by 148%? That's going to give us 481. So here we were given that number and we were multiplying it to get that final number. Here we're given the final number and we're trying to get the initial number. So if we do the algebra here, we get 1.48 here. And then what we can do, divide both sides by 1.48 to isolate. For that x is going to end up being 325. right? So that there ends up being the answer. So 390 is the answer to 1, 21 is the answer to 2, and then 325 is the answer to 3.